Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in today for this particular session. So I'll do a quick intro. My name is Vlad. I work as a strategic partner manager for Google AdMob. I work specifically with Central Eastern Europe, emerging markets, and Russia. Previous to my work in AdMob, I spent multiple years working on the ad side of business, specifically focusing on the advertiser space within Russia and the CE region. So my presentation today is going to be on a very, let me say, important topic for myself, as I work part of the ads ecosystem. And today I'm going to be talking to you about what, based on our work with different partners, what do we see are the more sort of important aspects of ads monetization. So a quick disclaimer, I will not be talking specifically about AdMob today. I will try to encompass the entire industry and cover the aspects of what it means really to monetize your apps using ads. And we'll try to specifically focus on that aspect. So we're going to cover 4 main topics today. It's going to be ads ecosystem. We're going to talk a little bit about ad networks and ad servers. We're going to talk about user experience and monetization, and then we're going to focus a little bit on the user itself. So again, as I mentioned, based on our experience working with various different developers and publishers all across Europe and globally, we thought that these are sort of the main things where we sometimes see there's a lack of knowledge or a lack of understanding among different parties and among different people within a certain given game studio or a company. And what I'm going to be aiming to do today is to sort of run you through, again, through these basics. I'm not going to be going into advanced topics like setting up complex mediations or anything like that, but I'm going to cover the core basic aspects that are very important to understand from early days in order for you to build a successful app monetization strategy moving forward. So let's kick it off with the first part, which is the more general part that very few people actually have a good understanding of how this works. So we're going to talk a little bit about ads ecosystem, ad servers, and ad networks. So to kick it off, in a nutshell, very simply, in an ads ecosystem space, there are 2 main players. We have the advertiser, or who buys space to put their ads on, and we have the publishers who sell the space in their apps, or let's say if we're talking about more traditional web business on their websites, they sell that space so that ads can be served on that particular space. Now, how the advertisers and publishers interact one with another, we can see it in this particular graph over here. So I'll walk you through 2 different potential scenarios. One scenario is we're going to take app developers who actually are also advertisers. So let's say you've developed an app, you want to get more users into it, you go and you become an advertiser. Those ads that you create alongside other ads that come from non-developers, so let's say retail, travel, so on and so forth, they all get into a pool and they end up being served on the publisher's side. And these publishers then end up serving these ads to specific users. Now, same way we can talk a little bit that way around about app developers, that you as an app developer can also take the publisher route, where you develop an app, you put certain placements where you allow advertisers to advertise within your apps, and then you serve those ads to given users. In a nutshell, this is how pretty much the ads ecosystem operates. We're going to go a little bit more in detail in the next couple of slides. Before we do that, there's a couple of concepts that we need to understand. So first, what is an ad network? So an ad network, as you can see, is a demand pool, right, managed by a specific ad tech company. This is not a database of ads readily available to be served. It's a system where the advertisers input ads and input specific formats or types of ads that they want to serve. And these ads end up being served to a specific publisher or on the property of a specific publisher, better said. Now, an ad network is just a piece of the entire scheme of ad monetization. The more important one is the ad server. So the ad server, or as some of you might know from the industry, the mediation platform, or the mediation server, is a technology that allows an app to pick which ad network has the best ads to serve right now for a given user in that app, picks that specific ad network, and then ends up serving the winning ad. So let's go a little bit and decipher this entire scheme in more details. Let's start with this example. So we'll take a typical user. You, as a developer, have, let's say, a male user. He's 25 years old. He is interested in downloading like gaming apps. This is very high level, and this covers maybe potentially a very, very small percent of the actual users in the apps. But for the sake of the example, we're going to stick to this. So what happens is that you, as a developer or a publisher, you have this user data. What you do with this user data is before you want to serve an ad, you send this user data to the ad server, who distributes them to the ad networks. The ad networks get this information. They tell their advertisers, hey, there is this user available to be served a specific ad. These are his interests. Different advertisers bid for that. The ad network picks a winner, the specific winner for this specific particular user. So let's say if we look in the graph here, 2B is each ad network A and ad network B. They pick a specific ad that they want to serve, and they return these ads to the ad server. What the ad server does afterwards is the ad server looks at all of these inputs and picks which one actually has the highest CPM. In best case scenario, which one has the high CPM. So we can talk a little bit about this in a second. This ad then later on is passed to the app, and the app serves the ad to the user. In a nutshell, this is it. Now, when it comes to the ad server technology, there is a couple of different ways how that can work. The most traditional current way is to do a waterfall, meaning that you set up calls to different ad networks and you ask them if they have ads for a specific price that you want, so that you can serve that ad. And you go and ask different ad networks, starting from the top, which means the highest paying ones, and you go slowly until you hit a specific ad network that has, for the price that you're asking, an ad to serve to the specific user that you have. Not for your app overall, but for the specific user. And this is a very important piece here, the user itself. Now, this is a traditional way, a waterfall. Now, this traditional methodology is currently available in any pretty much ad server that there is in the market. So you can see on this slide there are different ad serving platforms like AdMob, like Mopub, IronSource, there's Upload and Max, so on and so forth. And there's an even bigger amount of advertising networks, mainly AdMob, Upload, and Facebook, so on and so forth. So any of these ad networks can serve in any of these advertising platforms. As you can see, some have both solutions as ad networks and advertising platforms. Some just do purely ad network. So a purely ad network would be, let's say, Facebook Audience Network. They're just purely focused on that, and they leave all the ad serving piece and technology to be developed or implemented by other companies. Now, the traditional waterfall methodology is slowly moving away, and in my opinion, and the opinion that we have here at AdMob, is that this will become an obsolete technology in a very, very short period of time. The main technology currently evolving is the real-time bidding technology, and this actually should be the one that should have evolved a long time ago, but it's taking a little bit of time for it to develop. So the main difference between traditional waterfall and real-time bidding is that in traditional waterfall, you call a network once at a time and ask if they have a specific price. Whereas in real-time bidding, what you do is you say, hey, I have this user with this parameters and this attributes. Who is willing to pay me what? That user information is passed on to different ad networks, and that networks bid in real time for that given user if they want to serve that user or not. And the system simply picks the most high paying one and serves this. So this is a pretty great technology, especially when you have different network fluctuations, ups and downs. And if you have a traditional waterfall with like a very detailed setup, it takes you a lot of time to invest to adjust that particular waterfall so that it matches in particular what the current fluctuation is. So I think a good example in the near future is going to be Black Friday, where all the CPMs are going to go up. people are going to want to bid more. But if you have a traditional waterfall, you're going to have to spend time adjusting for every single waterfall for every single country, and sort of that matches. Whereas with real-time bidding, you don't need to bother. It just works automatically. So that was more on the basics of ads ecosystem, ad server, ad networks. So again, ads ecosystem, you have publishers and advertisers working to serve an ad for a specific user. Ad networks is a demand source where you have all those ads available, where advertisers put in and publishers serve. Ad servers is the technology to figure out which ad network is the most suited and the best paying for a specific user to be served a specific ad. Now, what we're going to do now is we're going to dive in an in-app user experience. So this methodology we use at AdMob to consult our various different developers and their apps. And what we do here is we focus on 4 main elements that we believe are actually the most important ones when it comes to ad monetization. These are onboarding, engagement, retention, and then monetization, more specifically, more like detailed elements of it. So let's dive into all of these and sort of see what are the sort of high-level elements of each one of them. So onboarding is pretty straightforward, right? Like you have a certain experience when you launch an app for the first time, and you want this to be a good experience. And if it's a good experience and you like it, you'll most probably tend to come back to this app. So this is one of the first things we assess, is that we look at things like how do you download, launch, and the first session experience. We look at how is the overview looking and what is the game mechanic. Do you as a developer actually offer this possibility and like an overview of this entire piece to your users or not? The other things that we usually recommend is that in terms of onboarding, a very crucial aspect is for you to have things like events and user path funnels so that you understand really what's happening on the onboarding experience, where the users drop off, and how can you enhance that particular experience so that those users achieve certain events that you want them to achieve, or they take certain paths that you want them to take when they launch the app for the first time. The last but not the least, this one is going to be present, and most of them do run A/B tests, check different experiences, check different onboardings, and make sure that you find the one that fits the best for your particular app. The next one is engagement. So after you've onboarded the user likes your app, they start coming to your app day after day after day. At some point, they're going to drop off, and we're going to talk about retention in a second. But what you need to do meanwhile, so that they don't drop off and you don't suffer from attrition, what you need to do is you need to focus on a couple of crucial aspects. So here you have the more important ones. I'm going to focus a little bit on each one of them. In my opinion, translation and localization is one of the most crucial things if you want to launch a global app. And you as a developer, you should invest a lot of time into making sure that this is done in a proper manner. You should be able to adjust the level of difficulty on the user based on the user savviness that keeps them more engaged and entertained. Offer things like free bonuses and like check-in bonuses for like say daily activities and stuff like that. That usually brings a better emotional trigger to the user and a better emotional connection to the user to stay with your app a bit longer. The last one is a bit trickier and requires a lot of work, but building a community around your app is actually a pretty successful approach if you have the time and the will to invest in this. I've worked with a developer that had an app that reached millions and millions in revenue, and they never, not a single time invested a single dollar into user acquisition. What they invested their money into is building a strong community around the app itself and making sure that they interact with those users, with people who like it, who like the app. They listen to their feedbacks, they create forums, they see how people interact with the app, and they gather sort of real-time feedback from those users. And this guaranteed them a very good success with their apps moving forward, because every single time they would release a new version of the app, they would post it in that community, and they would get pretty much immediate upgrades or immediate changes, so on and so forth. And that provided them a pretty successful engagement with the users, again, without really investing anything in user acquisition. The third one is retention. I think this one's pretty straightforward for any app developer, that this is an important aspect. A couple of things here to consider, maybe if you haven't, is you need to set up things like measurable events to understand maybe at what points do your user actually fall out of the app, and how can you better sort of behave or help them behave in that aspect. And the other thing is enabling things like push notifications. And if you can also spend a little bit of time on like building very nice push notifications, things that are going to remind the user, going to bring them back, obviously if those notifications are enabled. But another thing you might consider is retargeting, or in other terms known as remarketing, as sort of paying to bring back those users that have been part of your app before. And again, if you go a little bit more in detail here and you set up things like lifetime value and you measure those metrics, and then based on that, you can build certain user lists, which you can afterwards use in things like Facebook or on Google Ads to retarget users, the better for you, as you can potentially target to specific branded or written messages for those users that can potentially bring them back to you in your given app. Now, the last one is monetization. Again, I'm not going to spend much time on this one. There's a couple of things, again, worth mentioning. So the first one is don't overload your waterfall. As I mentioned before, I'm a very strong believer of real-time bidding. One of the main benefits of real-time bidding is that it solves the issue of ad loads. What a lot of developers do is they set up very complex waterfalls, hoping that this will somehow increase their revenue and in the long term, whereas, again, as I'll mention a bit further on, that's not really the case. Also, having very complex waterfalls can lead sometimes to situations where you actually don't end up serving an ad, as there's no there's no ad network that would be willing to pay a specific amount that you might be asking, and you end up, instead of earning some revenue, not earning anything. The other thing here is use your LTV or lifetime value data in your performance assessment. So it's pretty good to understand what kind of users do you have, understand what is your top 5% bracket and how much revenue can you earn from them, understand what is your middle sort of class in the app and your bottom users when it comes to revenue. It's even better if you can actually analyze the user behaviors of those different groups and try to understand how can you better adjust your app so that you satisfy better and maintain more users in the upper brackets rather than the lower ones. And even for the lower ones, you can use things like remote config to potentially increase your ad density and serve more ads purely because they're bringing you way too small of a revenue in the app. And the last one, again, as I mentioned with the community, is like really listen to your users, right? Like if you open up your Play Store or iTunes Store and like you read the reviews, and if people are really complaining about their ad experience, maybe it's worth to like consider doing some small changes. Same goes if you have forums or different feedback loops. Now, to sort of sum this up, as you have heard, most probably in every single session, in every single part that I've talked today, I've mentioned the user. And the user is really the most important part of your app. It's really the quality of the users that bring you the most revenue. If you're going to focus on making sure that you have good users that stay a long time and they have a great experience in your app, you don't need to bother that much about very complex setups, very complex CPM, very complex waterfalls. Obviously, this will depend on the different approaches and different types of games that you sort of guys make. But at the end of the day, they differ quite a lot. So a couple of things here. Make sure that your user feels that you care for them. Again, try replying to those reviews on Play Store. Try answering those users, interacting with them, replying to their emails, so on and so forth. Acquire the right users, may it be organic, may it be paid, so on and so forth. Invest a little bit maybe in App Store optimization and things like that. And the last one is like be genuine and unique. This is a very crucial piece, as it really is going to help you connect better with those users, and the users can respect you way more around because of that in the end. So to sum it up, four quick bullet points. One is you have four main players in the ads ecosystem. It's the developer, publisher, advertiser, and user. Ad networks are the demand source, like looking for targeted users, while ad servers help you serve those specific ads and decide which ad networks get to serve for the user. When you focus on user experience, think of things like onboarding, engagement, retention, and monetization. And the user is your most valuable asset. And I cannot stress on this more, as a lot of people actually invest the resources and hire people to specifically go and do very complex waterfalls, very complex setups, it's going to be way better for you in terms of long-term revenue if you rather invest that on the user and try to use some available automated technologies in the market. That's all from me. I'm ready for a Q&A. So thank you for listening, everyone.
Thank you, Vlad. Thank you very much for your report. Actually, I think that as we don't have quite much time for Q&A, I should announce that, guys, if you are watching this report and you have any questions, you are free to ask them in Pine, both to the speaker and to the moderator. So we will just cover it further on. And I would like to ask Vlad the following question. I appreciate that you are a strong player about the real-time bidding. But for the developers, for the companies, it's like a black box. I mean, if you set up the waterfall, you can check everything, what happens, why your ad was not shown, if it's the issue with the waterfall or with the network. With real-time bidding, you are sometimes just taken as it is. You don't have any options. So basically, we understand why, for example, Facebook does it. But we understand why big players are trying to do that. But don't you feel that it really takes out the control out of the developer hands?
So the control per se, that is the word I really want to tackle here. As I've mentioned, at the end of the day, it's not really the control that the developer has on the waterfall. It's again, as I mentioned, it's really the users for which the advertisers pay. It's the advertisers who pay to serve those particular ads, not the publishers decide, what price I'm going to serve. I'm going to give you a example. Let's say you have a middle-class region in the city, right? Like you put a billboard in that middle-class region. You, as the owner of the billboard, you're going to ask, hey, I want you to pay me as for the top 1% of all the people in the city where you have middle class. Not a single advertiser is going to pay you that. So just same context goes here. If you focus on the user and make sure that you have a very good quality users, you actually don't need a complex waterfall setup. Like most networks are going to pay you top dollar if you have pretty much what it takes to serve that that particular ad, or you have the users for that particular demand. Now, to sort of answer on the other aspects, like the more technical ones, right? Like you can always set it up. Like if you want to troubleshoot and understand what network served and so on, if you go a little bit more in depth and you set up some events and you set up some tracking and look at the logs, you can track even for real-time bidding the solution. But what the real-time bidding at the end of the day does really is just it takes away all of that unnecessary work that you put into managing the waterfall, controlling it, checking it every single day, so on and so forth, and just gives you the highest paying ad for every single impression, and that's it.
Okay, but it works only with the open community when you understand that you are really getting that. For example, if we have a look at Apple right now with the IDFA changes, it doesn't feel that so friendly and open because we are all waiting for that to come and we don't know what to expect. Right now, it's being served on real-time bidding. We can understand what is going on. But once you get stripped out of access, any tracking and everything which we get after IDFA, it doesn't sound so fair, trackable, and optimistic.
Yeah, so that's a very valid question, and we've been also thinking about this particular aspect, what we are gonna do in this world. So while I cannot sort of give you the specific information and the approach that AdMob is gonna take here, what I can definitely tell you is that at the end of the day, there's still gonna be users for who this is gonna apply. You cannot move away from that. There's still going to be users who will allow IDFA tracking. Second piece is for those who are not going to allow this, some companies might take a slightly different route in terms of not having specific targeted attribution, but a lot of companies can approach it in a more modeled attribution approach. And you can still be able, even though you don't have the specific data of that user, just based on certain behaviors and certain things, you can estimate who those users are and what are their interests, and still be able to serve that. Again, obviously, it's not going to potentially work the same as it's working right now, and there's still a bit of time for us not only to understand what's going to be the reality, give it another month or two, but also what really approach is Apple going to take at the end of the day. As you can see that so far it's been still a bit unclear on what their actual approach is going to look like.
Okay. Thank you very much, Vlad, once again.